Hello and welcome to the first tutorial of our Excel VBA course, where we begin our quest to gain Excel Jedi powers so that we can handle or manipulate almost any data within our Excel spreadsheet and handle any problem. Our first tutorial is going to be to look at recording macros. Now, those of you who have taken the Excel Superhero course, we would have covered recording macros there. Now, the examples used will be a little bit different, some of them, so it is completely up to you whether you skip this chapter and go straight into the VBA elements, or whether you sit through these as a kind of recap and a bit of a refresher and see some slightly different examples used. There will be some VBA elements covering in this section as well, but for the most part it will be looking at recording. And this is very important. We'll look at the differences as the course evolves, but recording a macro will never look beyond. It can be a very helpful tool no matter how far you get in VBA. It won't generate the best code and stuff, we'll look at that, or be that powerful, nowhere near. But it's an important element to help us learn, understand, get code to tweak, in much the same reason that you may spell check work or have a dictionary at home. Why do you? Do you not know that language? Of course you do. But you forget how things are spelled, you look at words you're not familiar with, this kind of stuff. And in much the same way with recording, we can't write code for every single feature that Excel has. We don't even know them all. Nobody does. So it's an important step to start with. And as an example here, what we want to be able to do is on this worksheet on screen, I want to protect the formulas on it. Now this spreadsheet only has 3 cells with a formula in. So this may be a basic example. But I want this macro, a little clicky button on our toolbar. When I click it, I want it to be able to lock down the cells that have a formula on the spreadsheet. I don't want to have to be able to tell the macro. And so, look, they're in these 3 cells here, B10 to D10. I don't want to have to do that. Whatever's going on in that spreadsheet, I'll click a button. Excel will figure out where the formulas are, lock them down. That's what I want to happen. So before we get going with recording our macro, we're going to have a little rehearsal. We're going to plan and research our steps. And this will become, we'll recap on this as the course goes on. And into the VBA elements, it will be more important that, although it's not imperative, it's a good idea to plan our stuff before we look at recording it. We want to make sure we know what we're doing and the best way of doing it before we get going. I want to make sure it even works. So, my plan here is that we are going to select the square in the top left to select all the cells of the spreadsheet. I don't know whether these cells are locked or unlocked. I can't guarantee this because I don't know what other people are doing on this spreadsheet. I want to go into the Format Cells dialog box any way we're comfortable in doing so, to the Protection tab, so that with this locked box, I'm going to turn it on and turn it off to ensure that them cells are unlocked. So when I click OK, they're now unlocked. I get these little triangles warning me where the formulas are. Are you crazy? Why would you do that to formulas? I'm not going to. What I'm next going to do is I'm going to the Find and Select button on the Home tab, and sorry, I'm not going to go to Special. I'm going to Formulas. I'm going to select all the cells of this spreadsheet that have a formula in them. So when I click that, it selects the cells with the formula, selecting only them 3. That feature is a lot more powerful than it might initially look. The fact that Excel figures out where the formulas are and selects them. Very relative way of working, extremely powerful, very useful. I'm then going back into Format Cells, Protection tab, and locking them. 3 down, the warning disappears. And then I'm going to be going to review and protecting the sheet. And I won't worry about a password or any of these other features for now. It's just an example of recording a macro. Those of you who took the Excel Superhero course, we would have done worksheet protection on that. So the reasons why we're unlocking cells and locking cells and the features in here will be more, you'll understand things more. Or you may know it from outside doing that course. But now I've protected that sheet, that is done. Now I haven't recorded a macro yet, I've just kind of rehearsed what I want to do. Next step is, if I'm happy with doing that and it seemed to work okay, is to record it. So in the future I'll have a button that will run that macro and do that job. Because I don't know what that was, 8 clicks? I didn't really count as I was doing it. Nothing crazy, but certainly would be more helpful. So I'm just going to backtrack my steps. I'm going to unprotect that, and I won't bother locking. It's irrelevant for the recording to work. And I'm going to start recording the macro. To do this, I'm going to the View tab and the drop down arrow for the Macros button. Now I do have a record macro button actually in the bottom left of my screen down here, we can see. So I could go that way, I could go the developer tab way, but I'm going to go this way as I'm here already and look at recording a macro. First thing it will ask is, what would you like to call the macro? I'm going to call it Protect Formulas. Let's try and spell that correctly. Protect Formulas. That sounds like a good name for me. That's what I'm doing. Now you're not allowed to use spaces in macro names, so I've got an underscore here to skip around that issue. Shortcut key. Would I like to use a shortcut key for this? Now personally, no. I'm not a big fan of this feature. It's not to say it can't be useful, but personally not a fan of it. If I did choose Control P, it doesn't even warn me, but that will become the shortcut key for this macro, therefore replacing print in the scope of this macro. If I chose R, I'll choose R then. Copying series to the right, or F, which is find. So, potentially dangerous. You cannot undo a macro. Your Control Z or your spinny blue arrow will be disabled after running a macro. You cannot undo it. Your saving grace, if this has made a mistake, is to close the spreadsheet down, saying no to saving changes. So potentially dangerous. This macro is quite harmless. People can just unprotect it if they know the password. But personally, not a big fan of the benefits. You might as well have a clicky button. It's not that important, as to I've seen it do bad things in the past. Where do I want to store the macro? Now we're going to store it in this workbook. Meaning this macro, the scope of the macro, it's only available when this workbook is open. So I can email this workbook to others and the macro will be travelled with it for distribution. But I have to have this file open. I have access to it and have it open. The personal macro workbook, the other useful setting in there, which we'll see at some point during this course, makes this macro global for you. So the word personal, it's available only to you. So in your login, your kind of roaming profile in a business scenario. And this macro is available in any file that you use. You don't have to have it open. It's a hidden file, this personal workbook. Sort of like a template. And it just sits behind the scenes, making these macros available to you at any file that you use. Not for others. So pros and cons to them two different settings. For now I'm going for this workbook. I won't worry with a description, but here, actually let's type one in. I'll just say that this macro protects cells containing formulas on the current sheet. There you go, that's what it does. And I'll click OK. So that's going to begin to record our macro. I can see in the bottom left hand corner of my screen that there's a blue square on the status bar. That's my stop button. We'll be pressing that when we want to finish recording. So let's get this job done. This video is getting a little bit larger in length. So, running through our steps. The square in the top left to select all the cells on this whole worksheet. Home tab, arrow in the corner of that number group to open up the Format Cells dialog box, or however you'd like to get that done. Protection tab, make sure they're unlocked. I'm going to turn it on and turn it off again to force that into play, and to click OK so the cells are unlocked. And I can see the green triangles appear there. Straight into the Find and Select button on the Home tab and tell it to select all the cells that contain a formula. It grabs them free. Back into the Format Cells dialog box using this arrow or some other approach. Protection tab, lock the cells. Lock the selected cells. Done. Now what I'm going to do is go into, what I might do actually first is I'm going to click a vacant cell to deselect them. Review tab, protect the sheet, and just click OK. I don't want to change any of them settings. Data is protected. I'm going to go straight to that blue square down the bottom and stop the recording. I see the blue square disappear, replaced with the record macro button. So my macro is done. No nice messages appearing, saying congratulations Alan, that is a fantastic macro you've just created, well played. Nothing like that. We have to have a little bit of faith that it must have worked. I don't have a clicky button at the moment to run that. We're going to look at different techniques for that over the coming tutorials. But for now, we have our first macro.